Over the last month or so, my workbench, my house, and my entire life has been in complete chaos. All because I agreed to make my son a Halloween costume. Greetings fellow Earthlings, welcome back to Darlingbrough Sci-Fi Builds. I'm doing something a little bit different this video because I've been inspired by my son Nathan.
By the way, I used to be in other videos. You can check them out if you want.
Good lad. He has asked me to put together a Halloween costume because he wants to go trick-or-treating this year.
Spring Trap.
Spring Trap from
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah.
FNAF. Well, FNAF. Whatever you want to call it. FNAF or Five Nights at Freddy's.
So we're going to do that.
Yeah.
The first place I started when designing the costume was the limbs. I had the idea of building a small cage around each part of the limbs and took to measuring up Nathan for his suit fitting. I felt like a tailor, but I really wasn't. Whilst I had Nathan's undivided cooperation, well, mostly, I took all of the measurements I needed to put the costume together before entering them onto a spreadsheet that I knocked up on the computer. As I had only measured around his arms and legs, this gave me the circumference of his limbs. However, I needed the radius or the diameter, so I could easily create a template using an overly complicated spreadsheet and pretty much the only bit of trigonometry that I remembered from secondary school. I calculated the diameter of each of the measurements so that I could create a circle which was the thickness of each of his limbs.
Dad.
I
I love you.
love you too. I used my amazing graphic design skills and created an awesome looking, hyper photorealistic mock-up of Nathan with all of the measurements and printed it off. I then dug out all of the spare foam that I had left. Most of it was XPS foam, but I did have a couple of sheets of pretty manky, dirty 3mm thick EVA foam from some old floor tiles I salvaged a while back. I gathered the required tools I needed, then started to make up some templates on cardboard with the help of Nathan.
Are you filming?
Now the reason for these templates was to make sure that I was measuring everything correctly and that the maths that I hadn't used in the last 25 odd years still worked. Because, you know, maths is somehow different nowadays than when I was at school. Using a highly complicated cataloguing system, I kept track of all of the measurements on the templates. So now that I've created all these templates out of cardboard, it's time to measure and check that they fit on Nathan. Nathan, come here! Right, so the shoulder. And then
Have we done one more?
above the elbow.
Do you need that perfect circle of cardboard?
That'll be right, won't it?
Do you need that?
No.
Please have it. Okay.
Okay, so that's that one.
Ooh. That not good with it.
That's about right, isn't it? For your wrist.
Yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Good.
Okay.
Now you may be wondering why I've actually only created 6 templates rather than 8. Obviously there's going to be 4 for the arms and 4 for the legs. And the reason is very simple. One of the templates actually shares the measurements for 3 different locations. So what's the point of doubling up on the work? Obviously I will need to create 3 different pieces from the foam, but for the template I only need 1. Okay. it was time to start transferring the designs to the XPS foam. I started to draw the circles onto the foam before drawing an outside circle which would create the ring which would go around Nathan's limbs. In an attempt to try and minimise the wastage of the foam, I worked out that if I created concentric circles using the different template sizes, I was able to use the inside of one as the outside of another. It was then time to cut the foam pieces out using a pretty basic craft hobby knife. The next step of the build was to create the pieces which would connect one circle to the next. Using some straight cut pieces of the XPS foam, I attempted to build a basic cage. However, I soon realised that straight cut pieces weren't going to cut it. Pun intended. Yes, I know, I'm hilarious. I went back to the drawing board, quite literally, and started to create some rough, curved pieces, which I could then use instead. The curved pieces worked so much better, and with the use of some cocktail sticks and contact adhesive, I was able to build up the cages which would go round each part of Nathan's limbs. Now I should probably point out that as you're watching this video, some of the shots or sequences that you see may not appear to be in chronological order. And the reason for that is that when I've come to edit this video, I've decided to try and show you a clear and concise way that this project was put together. However, in reality, I tended to jump around and do a lot of different parts all over the place. So if I was to put the video in kind of order as to how I did it, it would make very little sense. So just go with me, ignore some of the glaring continuity errors, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the video. Yeah, I just thought I'd take a few minutes to explain that. Once the cages had been completed, it was then time to start covering them with the outer skin. Using a hot glue gun, I started to attach parts of the 3mm EVA foam floor tiles onto the cages. Unfortunately, I quickly ran out of this and was forced to start using several sheets of EVA craft foam, which was only 1mm thick, to finish the job. As it was a lot thinner than the floor tiles, I had to thicken it up using 3 layers to keep everything consistent. You're going to have
a jumper underneath.
Yeah. Right, same position.
Wait, can this go up a tiny bit there?
Yeah, right, same position. After a quick test fit on Nathan, just to make sure everything was a correct size, it was then time to start applying some of the damage to the limb pieces. I simply cut away some random holes and slots using a craft knife so that each piece looked worn and ragged. Once the damage had been cut out, I realised there might be instances where people could see through the holes into the cages and possibly see the EVA foam inside. Whilst this wasn't a huge issue, I still decided that painting the insides black was probably the best and quickest way to cover up any of the coloured foam. Whilst I had my brushes out, I decided to paint all of the metal cages inside each of the limb pieces with some metallic silver that had been sat on my shelf for many years. a good squirt of paint thinner, and the paint was good to go. With the limb sections now completed thus far, my confidence was soaring as I felt like I had made serious progress to the costume. However, the rug was about to be pulled out from under me. So today is now October the 14th. I was under the impression that Nathan's Halloween party was on the 31st, which gives me around about 2 weeks from today to complete the costume. However, I have just been informed that his Halloween party is not on the 31st at all. It's on the 22nd of October, 8 days from today, and I have got a lot of work left to do on this costume. With the panic setting in, I started to re-evaluate exactly how much work I did have left on the project. I still have to felt the arm pieces, the leg pieces, build the groin piece, attach felt to the groin piece, build the torso, attach felt to the torso, build the head, felt the head, build the jaw, attach felt and teeth to the jaw, build the hands, build the feet, sort out the eyes, which may or may not include LED lighting, and then paint and weather the entire costume. I'm not sure if I'm going to finish it. As well as running out of time, I also started to run out of materials as well. Luckily, B&M stores saved my bacon. Now I know what you're thinking, that 5 packs of foam at £8 each is relatively expensive and probably a little bit excessive for a Halloween costume. However, when I went to buy these from B&M stores here in the UK a couple of days ago, when I took the first one to the till, it actually scanned in at £2. So there was only 5 left, so I bought all 5 of them. So this whole package cost me £10 here in the UK. £10 for a huge amount of foam, you can't beat it. Having lost about a week of build time in one conversation, I forged on. In order to create the waist piece, I started off by removing some of the outside edges of the XPS foam mats. Now normally these would be discarded, however I decided to interlace them to create a belt that would go around Nathan's waist. I applied heat to the foam sections using my trusty hairdryer in order to make the foam more pliable, before rolling it up and clamping it temporarily into place. I then used hot glue to stick the separate pieces together to make a continuous loop that was long enough to go around Nathan's waist. A second, shorter belt was constructed for Nathan's crotch. Again, this was hot glued and clamped into place until it became fixed. I asked Nathan to provide some feedback in the waist piece, and he told me that the belt between the legs was too wide for him.
This bit?
So you want it quite narrow in the middle?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
No, looks more like a... No,
Right, alright, no problem. Put an extra bit of material in just to give it that extra bit of support because it's now very thin.
let's hope. Let's hope it doesn't hurt.
In order to compensate for the lack of foam, I added some leftover ribbon strips to the crotch to provide extra support. It also meant that Nathan's costume would literally have red love hearts in the underwear. Once the main structure was completed, extra EVA foam was added to provide the correct shape of the waist. I decided to build the torso like a vest using sheets of the XPS foam. Only 2 sheets were needed, and I used the interlocking edges of the tiles to lock the front and back parts of the vest together. Again, I strengthened the shoulders using additional strips of ribbon. Using more offcuts of XPS and the contact adhesive, I attached the sides of the torso before adding additional foam padding around the neck at Nathan's request. For the belly, a sheet of EVA foam was attached to the front of the torso using contact adhesive for strength. And then the damage pattern was cut out using sharp craft knives. When it came to the head, I realised there was 2 potential ways of creating it, either where Nathan would wear the head over his and look out of the eyes, or wear the head on top of his and look out of the mouth. As this was more of a cosplay design, we came to the agreement that looking out of the mouth would be a better option. Not only did it allow for more space, it would also make the costume seem taller. I had seen multiple videos on YouTube about creating helmets, and I must admit that I felt I had a good grasp on how to create one. I wanted the top of the head to be a dome shape, and so designed a template to cut out of the EVA foam, which would create the desired shape. However, as I was forming the pieces together, I quickly realised I had made some serious errors in my calculations. Unfortunately, I didn't actually manage to grab a shot of the utter shambles I had created. However, it's probably a good thing, as it resembled the head of a sandworm from Beetlejuice. Now, if you don't know what it looks like, I will put a link to a picture of one in the description. I searched for alternative ways to create a dome out of foam and discovered an amazingly helpful video by Irina Sorokina on creating a sphere pattern using nothing more than a compass and a ruler. Again, I will put a link to this video in the description. Definitely check it out if you need to make a pattern for a sphere, either for foam or material. It is definitely one of the most helpful videos I have seen recently. After a few smaller tests, I created a semi-sphere which would become the top of the head. Attaching it all together using the contact adhesive, I was finally able to replace the nightmare with a round dome.
Actually, really happy with that.
After more trimming and some recycling of the offcuts from the head's original parts to create the nose, I started working on cutting out the eye sockets and rough damaged areas of the head. Whilst working on the head, I also started to work on the bottom jaw as well, using a couple of pieces of EVA foam. For the inside of the head, I decided to use one of Nathan's old bike helmets as a good solid base to work from, and it would also allow me to securely attach the head so that it didn't fall off. I also realised that the top of the helmet could be disguised as the internal skull of the costume, visible through the damaged holes of the headpiece. I covered the helmet in a couple of sheets of pink EVA craft foam before applying a light coat of deep red spray paint. Now I didn't want to go too gory or gruesome for this costume, as it was going to be worn initially for a Halloween party at Nathan's primary school. Now obviously I could add additional gory elements to the costume if required. For the jaw, my initial idea was to incorporate a way that Nathan could animate the bottom jaw whilst wearing the costume. To do this, I designed a basic hinge using some pieces of wood attached to the jaw and some bolts which attached to metal brackets on the sides of the bike helmet. During the construction of the bottom jaw, however, I soon realised that it was going to be a lot easier to leave the jaw loose so that Nathan could see out of it instead.
Face that way.
What?
Turn around and face the door. Face that way. Right, okay, so...
With the Spring Trap character, his eyes and eyelids were a prominent feature. I really wanted to recreate that and make it a prominent feature of the costume. I applied some brown felt to some small semicircles of foam, creating the eyelids, before I turned my attention to the eyes themselves. The eyeballs started off as a ball taken from a ball pit that Nathan had as a baby. The ball was cut in half and sprayed with a white primer spray paint before I filled it with some foam circles. Not only did this give the thin plastic some support, it also allowed me to fit some LEDs into the eyes as well. In true horror fashion, I chose some red LEDs and installed them into the eyes, creating a basic circuit with a switch and a small battery taken from an old vape. Now obviously you know that the character has the option to be evil, as the red LEDs have been installed in the eyes. It was around this time that I decided to start applying the felt to the costume. However, before I did so, I wanted to make sure I was using the best adhesives for the job. I decided to test a bunch of different substances to see the results. First on my list was the Impact Instant Contact Adhesive. I had found this was really effective at attaching the foam together, so I used the same method and I applied the adhesive to both the foam and the felt, allowing it to dry before pressing it together. If anything would stick well, I thought CA glue or super glue would probably be top of the list. I applied a thin layer to the EVA foam before pressing the felt into the adhesive. Yoo-hoo! All-purpose adhesive was next. Again, I applied a thin layer to the EVA craft foam and once again pressed the layers together before letting them set. PVA glue. I applied a fair blob of the PVA glue before spreading it out with my finger and then pressing the felt down. The last test was to see how well hot glue would attach the felt to the foam. I applied a fairly generous layer of the hot glue to the EVA foam and then applied the felt on top. I then left everything for a few hours to dry and stick before checking the results. The CA glue dried completely and provided an amazing bond between the foam and the felt. I would have torn either the foam or the felt if I had pulled them apart. However, one thing I did notice is that during the curing process, the CA glue got incredibly hot, even emitting a light plume of smoke. It was also incredibly pungent. I suspect that there was some kind of chemical reaction between the glue and the felt. Now if you know more than I do, please leave an explanation in the comments down below. The impact contact adhesive also provided an awesome bond between the felt and the foam. Whilst I did pull the test pieces apart, I think a slightly thicker application would have done a much better job.
A little bit easier.
The Yoo-hoo glue was pretty much useless for this application. The felt came away from the foam far too easily to justify using this. I must admit I was unsure how well the PVA glue would perform, but it was absolutely useless. The felt and the foam separated with literally no force required whatsoever. The hot glue also provided a firm bond, which would have caused a lot of damage if pulled apart. However, I did notice that the hot glue showed evidence of where the glue had been applied. So in conclusion, the CA glue, impact adhesive and the hot glue are the best ways to attach felt to foam, and this is what I'm going to be using. Now, I just need some supplies.
Have a look, see what fabric you can find, and I'll film you. It's like a green or yellow felt kind of. Yeah, but it's not really the material, is it? It's not felt, it's not fuzzy. Is that the right colour? That's the sort of felt, fuzzy felt material, isn't it?
Which is literally perfect.
Lovely, thanks a lot. There you go.
Might look like that might.
Go on then, walk out.
I started to apply the felt to the limb sections using the contact adhesive and the hot glue. When their sections were covered, I cut holes in the felt where the holes and damage appeared, and then carefully glued them to the perimeter of the damaged areas using the CA glue. I also found that working with the impact contact adhesive took a lot longer to apply, as I had to cover both surfaces with the adhesive, leave them to dry before pressing them together. Whilst it gave a better finish, I must admit I found myself switching between that and the hot glue gun, as it was quicker to apply and attach the fabric to the foam.
Completed.
I applied the felt to the waist area of the costume using the hot glue gun, making sure to cover all of the visible outside foam with the felt. It was the same with the torso, however I focused on creating a two-tone effect by using the brown felt on the belly. I worked in small sections, applying hot glue, then pressing the felt down before moving on to the next section. It was at this stage I really started to feel the costume taking shape. With the torso, I had decided to attach a velcro strip to the back so that Nathan could put it on like a vest and then seal it shut. The head was definitely the most difficult part of the costume to apply the felt to.
Here we go. Good job.
2 minutes.
What are you doing?
Having watched several YouTube tutorials on the best method for applying materials to costumes, I decided that wrapping the head in cling film, or saran wrap to my US viewers, applying masking tape and then cutting it into flat shapes before transferring the pattern to the felt was the best way to go. Once I had cut out the felt, it was then time to apply it to the head of the costume. As I wanted to cover a large, complex area, I decided to use the contact adhesive to apply it. Spreading it all over the head and the felt gave me time to plan how I applied each section before I had to attach it carefully. Although the final result had a fair few visible seams, I wasn't too worried, as I felt that this would match the overall aesthetic of the character and fit in with the vibe of the costume. Initially, I had wanted to create hands which could be animated by Nathan, allowing him to open and close them by using a system of pulleys. However, given the serious time constraints, I decided that posable hands would be an easier option and quicker to build. I cut small square tubes of foam and carefully wrapped them in the felt, making small sausages which I could use for each section of the fingers. For the knuckles and joint, I used another piece of the foam and a piece of florist wire. I pushed the wire through each knuckle and joint and into the end of each section before applying hot glue to hold everything together. Once the fingers had been created, I then cut another piece of EVA foam to the shape of the hand, covered it in the felt and attached the last of the knuckles using more pieces of foam and wire. The result was two creepy looking hands, both with posable fingers. The ears were both built from offcuts of EVA foam. I used the same double layer technique that I had used for the belly to create the two-tone effect. Off camera, I'd attached the full ear segments together with some wires, a short selection of foam and some springs which I had in my box of greeblies. I attached both of the ears to the head using painted lollipop sticks, hot glue and some EVA foam for support. As the deadline hit, I was still finishing off parts of the costume. Finishing touches such as the teeth, applying elasticated strips to the hands and building the feet were all done in such a rush that I didn't get the opportunity to film it. I was literally applying the weathering to the costume as Nathan was putting it on for the party. It was also the first time that I'd actually seen the entire costume at once.
Somehow I managed to achieve the impossible and complete the costume in time. Now I must admit it did involve me hot gluing items together, as Nathan was literally putting the costume on to go to the party, but it was complete. Now unfortunately, because we cut it so tight, I didn't have time to do a proper test fit before he had to wear it. And unfortunately, we didn't have time to prepare Nathan with proper clothing underneath, as you can see in this clip.
Do a wave. Again, that's something we'll need to sort out. Do some moves. Move that way a bit.
Even with all of the small issues that I could see with the costume, it went down really, really well. All of the other parents really enjoyed it, and the teachers really enjoyed it as well. So much so that they actually gave Nathan a prize for his costume at the Halloween party, which is great. Even so, there was a few things that I decided to tidy up before Halloween, because I knew that he was going to wear his costume again to go trick-or-treating. For example, I added an extra strap to the hands just to make sure they were a bit more secure, and I also added extra Velcro pieces to the waist and legs just to give the costume a little bit more stability and make sure that it doesn't start falling down. There was a few small things I had to fix, like for example the ears that had been damaged slightly during the party, and I had to replace one of the teeth, but again that was only a small issue. And for Halloween itself, we managed to get proper clothing to wear underneath the costume, and it looked a lot better. Now I must admit, I know it sounds really big-headed, but I am really proud of how well the costume came out. Yes, I know it looks a little bit janky in places, it's far from screen accurate, whether you're comparing it to the movies or the games, but anybody who knows the franchise and sees the costume will instantly know who the character is meant to be, and that's basically all I wanted to achieve. The jankiness of the costume I think kind of goes hand in hand with the character, and it fits in really, really well. The project has been an excellent learning curve for me. It's the first time that I've really worked with EVA foam or kind of created any kind of costume, and it's given me the confidence to do it all again. On top of that, it's also made me reevaluate how I approach projects. I spend a lot of time normally overthinking things and procrastinating and wondering if this is the best way of doing it. Whereas with this, I just didn't have time. So I just had to just get on and do it. And because of that, I've actually managed to achieve something I've set out to do. So I think that that is a mentality that I need to take forth into projects that I do on the channel in the future. One last thing that I just wanted to point out is that anyone who's watching this thinking that I have let my 7-year-old son watch Five Nights at Freddy's, I just wanted to point out that he hasn't actually seen the films or played any of the games. The reason that he is so familiar with the characters is because he watches YouTube channels which are based on Minecraft and Roblox, and they incorporate the characters from different franchises. For example, Five Nights at Freddy's, Chucky, Stephen King's It. He knows a lot of the characters through these kiddified versions on YouTube. So before anyone complains, no, I don't let my very young son watch horror films. It's not like when I was 6 and I watched Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive, or Robocop when I was 7. Yeah, let's not go there, shall we? Things were different when I was a kid. Anyway, I just hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, obviously hit the like button, give a bit of support. Subscribe to the channel so you do see some more of this. It's not all going to be costumes, there's going to be sci-fi models as well. And in the meantime, hasta la vista, I'll be back.